The Young and the Restless spoilers. Thurdays full episodes March 6, 2025. Chance's voice trembled as he delivered the news that had sent shockwaves through the inner circles of Genoa City. In a hushed, urgent tone over the secure line, he revealed that there had been no word from Phyllis and Sharon for days, and worst of all, no demand for ransom had been made by the kidnappers. The silence was deafening. Was it possible that one, or perhaps even both, of the women had met a tragic end? Or was this all an elaborate ruse, a twisted game with a motive that defied reason? At the office headquarters, tension crackled like electricity. Billy, the no-nonsense overseer of their covert operations, glared at Chance from across the room. His words were cold and unyielding. "I need answers, Chance. I want a full report, every shred of evidence or clue, by the end of the day. If you can't deliver, then you might as well pack up and hand in your resignation." The ultimatum hung in the air, a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the world they inhabited. Meanwhile, in a bid to defuse the escalating crisis, Nikki took it upon herself to arrange a reconciliation meeting between two of the city's most formidable power brokers, Victor and Jack. The hope was that by forcing these two titans of industry to come together, perhaps their combined wisdom could shed some light on the baffling kidnapping. Yet, when the meeting finally commenced in a luxurious, yet tension-filled conference room, the atmosphere quickly deteriorated into chaos. Victor and Jack, both accustomed to commanding authority, found themselves at loggerheads from the outset. Their voices rose in a cacophony of passionate declarations and pointed accusations, each as stubborn and unyielding as the other. The meeting devolved into a relentless argument reminiscent of the public spats of global leaders like Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, brash, unfiltered, and explosive. Personal agendas clashed with the shared goal of understanding the kidnapping's purpose, and soon the conversation spiraled into a bitter contest of wills. Amid the storm of discord, Victor remained a picture of unflappable calm. His eyes, steely and penetrating, never left Chance, who was stationed at the edge of the room with a dossier of scattered notes and cryptic clues. As voices clashed around him, Victor leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable, as he quietly asked, "Chance, have you found any evidence? Something concrete that could explain why the kidnappers would allow this to unfold without demanding a ransom?" Chance hesitated, his mind racing through a maze of leads and dead ends. He explained that the absence of a ransom demand and the silence following the abduction had left many questions unanswered. "The motive," he said, "seems to be more than just a simple crime or a straightforward act of terror. It's as if the kidnappers were playing a long game, a game designed to send a message or create chaos, rather than simply to extract money." Billy's impatient tapping on the desk punctuated Chance's every word. The notion that this could be a strategic maneuver, a twisted political ploy or a calculated power play, was as disturbing as it was intriguing. If the kidnappers intended to sow discord, to force the major players into a public confrontation, then every move made in the coming days could have far-reaching consequences. The implications were clear. A failure to decipher their motives could unravel the tenuous alliances that held the city's power structure together. Back in the conference room, the bickering between Victor and Jack grew more heated. Jack's face flushed with indignation as he argued that their inability to present a united front would only empower their adversaries. "We cannot allow personal grievances to blind us to the truth," he insisted, his voice straining with the pressure of responsibility. "This is about the safety of Phyllis and Sharon, and, ultimately, about the future of our families and our empires." Victor's measured tone belied the intensity of his internal calculations. "Jack," he replied coolly, "we are not discussing personal vendettas here. Our focus must be on uncovering the real intent behind this act. While emotions run high, we must think clearly and act decisively. I am listening to Chance's report, and I need every piece of intelligence he can muster." Between the clashing voices, Nikki tried to steer the conversation back to common ground, her own diplomatic skills tested to their limits. "Perhaps we need to consider that this isn't merely a kidnapping for ransom. There might be an external force at play, a hidden hand that's orchestrated this to destabilize our operations," she suggested softly. Yet her efforts were drowned out by the continuing torrent of accusations and defenses. As the meeting wore on, Victor's calm began to cut through the discord. His mind, always several moves ahead, was piecing together a puzzle that the others could not see. He recalled a series of subtle but significant clues, anonymous tips, unusual movements in the city's underbelly, and inexplicable gaps in the kidnappers' communication. Could these disparate elements be woven into a coherent strategy? Victor suspected that the answer lay in understanding the kidnappers' true intent, a motive that went far beyond personal gain. It was a calculated risk, a signal meant to unsettle the established order, to force every major player to question their allegiances and the stability of their power. Chance continued his report, his voice steadier now as he recounted the sporadic whispers and the enigmatic patterns he had observed. There's a theory, he proposed, that the kidnappers might be affiliated with a rival faction, one that seeks not to profit from ransom, but to exploit our vulnerabilities. They might have purposely refrained from making a ransom demand to avoid drawing immediate attention, preferring instead to create a prolonged period of uncertainty. Billy's eyes narrowed as he absorbed this information. And if that's the case, he said sharply, then we're dealing with a calculated political maneuver, one designed to erode our confidence and unity from within. We need to act fast and figure out who stands to benefit from this chaos. Meanwhile, the meeting between Victor and Jack continued to unravel along conflicting lines of thought. While Jack's frustration simmered, his deep-seated concern for the safety of those he loved was evident. He was tormented by the possibility that Phyllis and Sharon might have suffered irreversible harm. In contrast, Victor's composed demeanor masked a strategic mind already planning his next moves. The two men, despite their bitter disagreements, shared a common undercurrent of urgency, a need to restore order and reclaim the narrative of power in Genoa City. As the day turned into a tense twilight, the assembled leaders of the city's elite were left with more questions than answers. The mystery of the kidnapping, the absence of a ransom, and the possibility of a hidden political game cast a long, ominous shadow over their futures. Billy's ultimatum to Chance echoed in every silent pause, and the unresolved conflict between Victor and Jack hinted at larger battles yet to come. Nikki's attempts at reconciliation, though unsuccessful in the moment, planted seeds of potential unity that might later blossom into a more coordinated response. In the midst of this storm, Victor's eyes met Chance's, and for a brief, charged moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. The evidence might be incomplete, but the implications were clear. A calculated risk was afoot, one that threatened to upend the carefully maintained order of power. Victor's measured questions, his calm insistence on acquiring every piece of useful information, were the first steps toward uncovering a conspiracy that could shake Genoa City to its core. The meeting eventually adjourned without a definitive resolution, leaving each participant to wrestle with their own doubts and fears. As they departed, the tension was palpable, each step away from that room a reminder of the precarious balance between order and chaos. For Chance, the weight of his mission had never been heavier. For Billy, the clock was ticking. And for Victor and Jack, the ideological battle was just beginning, with the fate of not only Phyllis and Sharon but the entire power structure of their world hanging in the balance. In the silence that followed, as the city prepared for the coming storm, one question reverberated through every mind present: what was the true motive behind this inexplicable act? And more urgently, would they be able to unravel it before the tide of uncertainty washed away everything they had fought so hard to build? Phyllis's voice was barely a whisper in the suffocating darkness of the basement as she turned to Sharon, her eyes wild and desperate. "I'm ready for death if it means I can escape this hell," she murmured, her tone echoing off the cold concrete walls. The damp air of the underground cell only magnified her urgency as she clutched a battered chair, its metal frame cold and unyielding in her hands. For too long, this place had been a tomb for their hopes, a place where every minute stretched into an eternity of fear and despair. Sharon, whose heart had long been caught between the instinct to flee and the suffocating weight of her captivity, felt a strange mix of resignation and release as she listened to Phyllis. In that moment, the fighting spirit that had once held her back crumbled, and she allowed Phyllis to make her own choice. For the first time since their abduction, Sharon no longer tried to hold Phyllis back. She silently stepped aside, her eyes filled with both sorrow and an unspoken understanding that sometimes, when you're pushed to the edge, the only escape is to risk everything, even if that means facing death. But the silence of their desperate resolve was shattered almost immediately by the cold, commanding voice of the kidnappers. The captors, lurking in the shadows beyond the barred windows and heavy doors, barked orders through a loudspeaker fixed on the wall. "Sharon, stop her. Prevent Phyllis from trying to break out, or else you will both suffer the consequences." The ultimatum was as chilling as it was unyielding, and it hung in the air like a death sentence. The kidnappers had one clear aim: maintain control, and any spark of rebellion was to be extinguished immediately. Outside, dark rumors began to swirl like a gathering storm. Whispers in the corridors of the enemy's lair, and even through the frightened murmurs of captive allies, suggested that Phyllis was planning a daring escape within the week. They said she had been meticulously watching for any weakness in the security protocols, waiting for the precise moment to launch her desperate bid for freedom. Yet, as fate would have it, Sharon's own attempt at escape was far less fortunate. When the opportunity came, her legs failed to carry her fast enough through the maze-like passages, and the kidnappers pounced, ensnaring her once again and sealing her fate with the heavy clank of a reinforced door. Now, the tension in the basement had reached an unbearable peak. Phyllis's chair still lay poised near the shattered window, a fragile symbol of hope against the overwhelming odds. Every instinct within her screamed to move, to dash through that broken opening and disappear into the night. Yet, a fierce inner turmoil held her back. Would she leave Sharon behind? The thought of escaping to freedom while her companion remained in chains tormented her, twisting her resolve into knots of guilt and determination. In the oppressive silence that followed the kidnappers' harsh commands, Phyllis's mind raced with the images of what might lie beyond that broken window. She imagined a world where every breath of air tasted of freedom and every step was taken without the looming threat of unseen captors. But the truth was harsher. With Sharon trapped and the kidnappers' relentless presence a constant reminder of their captivity, every potential escape felt like a gamble, a risk with stakes far too high to bear lightly. Desperation gave way to a resolve forged in the fires of shared suffering. Phyllis knew she could not allow Sharon to remain imprisoned in this nightmarish limbo. Every rumor and every moment of their captivity had built to this single, defining moment. "I have to call for help," Phyllis whispered, her voice cracking with a mixture of fear and determination. She fumbled for her hidden phone, a contraband piece of technology she had managed to conceal from their captors, and dialed a number with trembling fingers. The line crackled faintly before a trusted voice answered on the other end, a friend who had long been an ally in the shadows of Genoa City's treacherous underworld. "Listen to me," Phyllis said urgently, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting it to burst open at any second. "Sharon is still inside, and I can't leave her behind. You have to come, now. I can't fight these people on my own." Her plea was laced with urgency, the weight of each word pressing against the oppressive confines of the basement. On the other end, the voice of her ally, steady and resolute, promised immediate action, but even that assurance did little to calm the torrent of emotions swirling within her. Down the hall, Sharon's muffled protests and pleas for mercy were a constant reminder of the brutal reality they both faced. Each moment of delay, each second that stretched into an eternity, chipped away at the fragile hope that had sustained them. The kidnappers, aware of every whispered conversation and every small act of rebellion, had already set in motion plans to quash any further attempts at escape. Their orders were unyielding, and their patience was as thin as the cold, damp air that filled the cell. Meanwhile, the dynamic in the greater world of Genoa City was shifting. Rumors of the kidnapping had ignited a fervor among those in power, whispers that foretold not just a desperate act of rebellion, but an orchestrated challenge to the very structure of control that had long defined their existence. As news of Phyllis's planned escape and Sharon's recapture filtered through the networks of the city's elite, factions began to position themselves for what might be an impending crisis. Within this turbulent context, the kidnappers' motives grew ever more enigmatic. Why had they allowed Phyllis to flirt with freedom, only to clamp down with such brutal precision when her attempt was within reach? Was this a test, a twisted game designed to punish defiance, or was there a deeper, more sinister strategy at play? No one could say for sure, and as the hours ticked by, each unanswered question only deepened the mystery. As darkness gave way to the bleak promise of dawn, Phyllis remained huddled near the shattered window, her mind awash with conflicting thoughts. Her heart pounded in her chest as she awaited the arrival of her ally, a beacon of hope that might tip the scales in their favor. She could not shake the gnawing fear that, by the time help arrived, it might be too late for Sharon. The very thought of leaving her friend behind in such dire circumstances was a torment that threatened to overwhelm her resolve. Time was now their most dangerous enemy. The kidnappers' vigilance and their relentless orders had created a suffocating environment where every second was a battle against both despair and the possibility of retribution. The air was thick with uncertainty, and every creak of the old building seemed to echo the urgency of Phyllis's heartbeat. With each passing minute, the chances of a successful rescue dwindled, and the looming question burned at the back of her mind: will I be able to save Sharon, or will this day end with my friend still trapped in the clutches of our captors? In the midst of these agonizing thoughts, a sudden, muted sound reached Phyllis's ears, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle. Her pulse quickened as she peered through the jagged opening of the broken window. Could it be the rescue her ally had promised? Her hand tightened around the phone as she fought to steady her breath, every muscle in her body taut with anticipation. Outside, the sound of tires screeching to a halt and hurried footsteps signaled that destiny was at hand. Phyllis's heart soared with cautious hope as she prepared to make her next move. Would she be able to rally enough strength to fend off the kidnappers and break through the final barrier that separated her from freedom? And most haunting of all, would she find Sharon waiting on the other side, or would the cruel twist of fate have claimed her friend forever? In that charged moment, as the weight of past regrets and future uncertainties converged, Phyllis resolved to take the final, desperate step. The question that loomed in her mind was both simple and profound: would she call out with all her might for someone to come and rescue Sharon, risking everything to defy the kidnappers' brutal hold, and in doing so, reclaim not just her own freedom, but the life of the one person she could not bear to lose? The basement held its breath as Phyllis, with a strength born of pure determination, prepared to break the silence once more. Her actions, poised to set off a chain of events that could either shatter the cruel power of the kidnappers or plunge them into an even darker abyss, were about to redefine the meaning of loyalty and sacrifice in the unforgiving landscape of Genoa City.